It was early October when I decided to head out for a solo hiking trip. I'd been stressed at work for months and needed to disconnect, even if just for a few days. I chose a lesser-known trail system about 6 hours north of where I lived, close to the Canadian border. I didn't want popular campsites or well-traveled paths. I wanted quiet, something deep in the woods where I wouldn't hear another human voice for days. I did my research. The trail looped through forested valleys, cut across some low ridges, and wrapped around a few remote lakes. From everything I read, it was peaceful and rugged, the kind of place you had to work to get to, but nothing extreme. I had experience in the woods, more than most people I knew, so I wasn't too concerned. I packed carefully: tent, sleeping bag, dehydrated food, water purifier, emergency beacon, bear spray, all the basics. I even brought a spare compass and map in case my GPS failed. I told my brother exactly where I was going and when I'd be back. I was planning on 4 days out there. The drive up was long, but I didn't mind. The leaves had already started to change color. Yellows and reds splashed across the hills. It was cloudy and cool, perfect for hiking. I parked at the remote trailhead and locked up my car. No one else was around, which was exactly what I wanted. I slipped on my pack, adjusted the straps, and headed out. The first day went smooth. The trail was narrow but well-marked, and I made good time. The terrain rolled gently at first, with tall birch and maple trees lining both sides. I saw a few deer, heard woodpeckers in the distance, and even spotted fresh bear tracks near a stream. Nothing unusual. I made camp near a ridge with a decent overlook and set up just before dark. That first night was quiet, just the sound of wind in the trees and the occasional crack of something moving in the brush. Not close, but out there. Probably deer. I slept okay. Woke up around 3 a.m. needing to pee and stepped outside the tent. The moon was out, filtered through the clouds. I stood still for a second, listening. There was something about being alone in the woods at night. It strips everything down, makes you feel small. I felt a little on edge, but reminded myself that this was what I signed up for. The quiet, the isolation, the unknown. The second day, I moved deeper into the loop. The trail got steeper and rougher. A few washed-out sections made me slow down, but I didn't mind. I passed a small lake around noon, totally still and black as glass. There was an old fire ring by the shore, but no recent signs of anyone. I stopped for lunch there and just sat for a while. No wind, no animals, just dead quiet. I remember thinking how strange it was that I hadn't seen a single bird or squirrel for the last couple hours. That afternoon, I started noticing something odd. Nothing huge at first, just a feeling, like something was off. The trail veered through a thick pine grove, and I started to see broken branches at strange angles. Not like storm damage. They looked fresh. Some were twisted, not snapped. And here and there, I saw what looked like claw marks on tree trunks, but not from a bear. They were long and straight, like someone dragged a metal rake down the bark. I stopped and studied one of them for a while. For parallel lines, each maybe 8 inches long, dug into the wood. I couldn't figure out what kind of animal could have done that. I kept going, but I felt unsettled. The woods were too quiet now. No birds, no wind, no rustle of small animals. Just silence. I checked my GPS. Still on the trail. No sign of people nearby. I started hearing things behind me. Snaps, crunches, things that made me turn around more than once. But every time, nothing was there. The forest was so dense in some parts one couldn't see more than 20 feet off the path. I made camp earlier that evening, around 5 p.m., near another lake. The site was rough and uneven, but I didn't care. I just wanted to stop. I kept glancing into the trees while I set up my tent. I didn't eat much that night. I boiled water for one of those freeze-dried meals, but barely touched it. I kept hearing small noises just beyond the firelight. Sticks snapping, leaves crunching lightly. It wasn't constant, but enough to make me sit up straight and keep the bear spray close. I didn't see anything though, just blackness and the glow of my little fire. That night was the worst. Couldn't sleep. I kept waking up every hour, heart racing, listening. Around 2 a.m., I heard something outside my tent. It wasn't big, no heavy steps, but it was circling. I could hear leaves and sticks moving softly in a slow, deliberate pattern. Once, twice, then silence. I laid there, sweating, holding my knife even though I knew it probably wouldn't help. I didn't sleep after that. As soon as the sky lightened, I packed up fast and hit the trail without even boiling coffee. I wanted out. I checked my GPS again. I was still on the loop, but the map showed a shortcut trail that could cut a day off the trip if I took it east toward a fire road. I made the call. I'd had enough. I marked it on the map and turned east. The shortcut trail was barely used. Narrow, overgrown, and full of roots and brush. I pushed through it for hours. My legs were cut up and I kept stumbling. I stopped only once to refill my water bottle at a stream and shove down a granola bar. I noticed then that the woods felt even heavier here, like the air was thicker. I was sweating even though it was cool out. I kept pushing forward. Late afternoon came and I started seeing more of those strange marks on trees. Some deeper this time, some higher up, way too high for a normal animal. One mark was over 7 feet off the ground. Long, raking gouges that peeled the bark clean. I kept moving, trying to ignore it. I reached a small clearing just before dark. There was something there. At first I thought it was an old hunting shack, but when I got closer, I realized it wasn't even that. Just a structure someone had made out of logs, branches, and scrap wood. Crude, almost like a blind or a hide. The roof was half fallen in. Inside, there were piles of bones. Animal bones, I hoped, but some of them looked too big, too clean, arranged in patterns. I didn't stay long. I picked up the pace. My legs were shaking from exhaustion, but I didn't want to stop. The trail dipped into a ravine, and that's when I saw something that made me freeze. On a patch of damp ground just off the path, I saw a boot print. Fresh, same tread as mine, but it wasn't mine. It was slightly smaller and pointed in the same direction I was walking. That meant someone was ahead of me, not behind, but I hadn't seen anyone. No smoke, no sound, nothing. I moved faster. For the next hour, I kept checking the trail. More prints. Sometimes they disappeared. Sometimes they came back. Always ahead of me, always fresh. Then I noticed another set, larger, wider, bare feet. Not human, not animal. Just impressions, like something was pacing or waiting near the trail. I pushed hard up the last ridge before night fell. At the top, I finally saw what I'd been looking for. A signpost, faded and cracked, pointing toward the fire road. Only 3 miles to go. I ran those miles. My pack slammed against my back and my thighs burned, but I didn't stop. The trail was rough and overgrown, and I fell more than once. Cut my hand on a rock. Twisted my ankle. I didn't care. I was running on fear. It was full dark when I saw the fire road. Just a wide gravel stretch barely lit by moonlight. I staggered onto it, panting. I was bleeding from my knees and palms, soaked in sweat, limping, but I was out. No trees crowding around me, no branches breaking behind me, just open road. I kept walking until I reached the turnout where I'd parked. My car was there, no one else around. I climbed in and locked the doors. I didn't even change out of my boots. I just started the engine and drove. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something step into the road behind me. But there was nothing. When I got home, I unpacked everything slowly. I checked the boots. The treads were still caked with mud. I looked up the trail again, but I couldn't find any record of that shortcut I took. Not even on satellite view. I never reported what I saw. I didn't even tell my brother the full story. Just that the trip was harder than I expected and I'd come home early. I didn't want to explain the bones, the prints, the silence. I haven't been back to the woods since. I still hike sometimes, but only on crowded trails. Only where I can see people, where I can hear birds, where nothing watches me from behind the trees. Because whatever was out there in that forest, whether it was man, animal, or something in between, it didn't want me there. And I don't think I was the first person it followed. I just got lucky enough to leave. I'd done a lot of solo hiking over the years, always preferred the quiet and the space to think. Something about the rhythm of walking through trees, the smell of dirt and pine needles, the shift of light through leaves, it helped me stay grounded. I'd started when I was in college, just local trails, nothing crazy. Then as time went on, I pushed myself to go farther, deeper, more remote. Not for the thrill, really. I just liked being away from the noise. That day, I was in Northern California, hiking a loop trail in a forested area I hadn't been to before. I'd read about it on a few forums: moderate elevation gain, mix of old growth and dense underbrush, and low traffic during the week. That's what I wanted. I had planned to start early in the morning and make it a long-day hike, no camping gear. I packed my usual. Plenty of water, protein bars, some basic first aid stuff, a utility knife, headlamp, and a GPS tracker clipped to my belt. The weather was perfect, clear sky, mid-60s, no wind. I parked at the trailhead around 7:30 a.m. Mine was the only car there, just how I liked it. I signed the logbook like always, slung on my pack, and started walking. For the first couple of miles, the trail stayed relatively flat, weaving through groves of redwoods and patches of thick ferns. Bird calls echoed here and there, and I saw a few squirrels darting across the path. Occasionally I'd stop and just listen, nothing but the forest breathing around me. No planes overhead, no highway hum, not even a breeze. Just silence broken by distant rustling now and then. That kind of silence you can only get miles from anything. As I got deeper into the trail, the path narrowed and started climbing. The sun was getting higher, filtering through the canopy, casting these patchy beams of light that made everything look golden. I hiked steadily, stopping only to drink or take a few photos when I hit a clearing. I didn't think about much beyond my next few steps and checking my direction. It was just walking, one foot in front of the other. It was peaceful. By the time I hit the halfway point of the loop, I was at a higher elevation. The trees thinned out some and the underbrush got heavier. The trail was still visible, but it wasn't as well maintained. Some parts were overgrown, and I had to duck under fallen branches. I slowed down. The air smelled different up there. Less damp, more dry pine and dust. I was about 10 or 11 miles in by then. That's when I first had the feeling. It wasn't a noise or anything obvious. It was just this slow, creeping sense that I wasn't alone anymore. I stopped walking and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no rustling. Just stillness. But I'd done this enough times to know that your brain sometimes picks up on things before your conscious mind does. The feeling didn't go away. I kept walking, slower now. My eyes scanned more carefully. I looked up into trees behind me more often, into the brush beside the trail. Still nothing. I told myself it was probably just a deer or something. Maybe a coyote. Could have been anything. But I couldn't shake it. A few minutes later, I was walking along a narrow part of the trail with a steep drop on one side and dense brush on the other. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a tan-colored rock in the shade, but something about the shape was off. It was crouched, still as stone, about 15 feet away, half concealed by a deadfall. A mountain lion, full grown, from the size of it. I froze. From what little I knew about mountain lions, the fact that I was seeing it meant it wasn't trying to attack. That's what people said anyway. If one's hunting you, you won't see it until it's too late. But that didn't mean this one was harmless. It was staring straight at me, tail flicking slowly behind it. Not moving, just watching. I felt my whole body lock up. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even blink. I kept my eyes on it, and it kept its eyes on me. Time stretched out. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. My knees felt like they were going to give out. I didn't dare turn my back. I remembered reading somewhere that you're supposed to make yourself look bigger and not run. Running is what prey does. But I didn't have the guts to raise my arms or move at all. Then it shifted its weight just slightly. It stood up slowly, still watching me, then walked a few feet to the left, staying half hidden in the brush. It wasn't stalking, just moving, almost like it was bored. Then it stopped again, looked at me once more, and turned around completely. It walked off. No sound, just gone. I stood there frozen for at least another full minute. Then I slowly backed up the trail, eyes scanning every direction. I didn't start walking normally again until I was at least a few hundred feet away from the spot. Even then, my nerves were wrecked. Every stick breaking in the distance made me flinch. Every shadow looked suspicious. I checked my GPS. Still on the right track, still following the loop, but I wanted out of there as fast as I could without actually running. I didn't eat, didn't take any more photos. Just walked, fast, eyes up, every second. I didn't see the mountain lion again. No other hikers either. About 2 hours later, I made it back to the trailhead. My car was still the only one in the lot. I climbed in, locked the doors out of instinct, and just sat there for a few minutes, catching my breath, trying to process what had just happened. I didn't report it, not because I thought it wasn't serious, but because I wasn't sure what there was to report. It didn't attack. It didn't follow me. It just watched. Probably a normal day for that animal. But for me, it stuck with me hard. I replayed that moment over and over again for weeks. What haunted me wasn't what did happen. It was what could have. That moment where I saw it and it saw me, and how close I might have been to not walking out of there at all. Since then, I've kept hiking, but I changed some habits. I always check local wildlife reports now. I carry bear spray, not just a knife. I don't wear earbuds or let myself zone out, even on quiet trails. I never go deep without someone knowing my exact route and timeline. That day didn't end in a fight or a chase, but it was the closest I've ever been to knowing what it's like to not be the top of the food chain. And that feeling has never really left me. It was supposed to be a quiet solo hike. Nothing ambitious, nothing stupid. Just a full day on my own out in the woods to clear my head. I'd been stressed for a while. Work, bills, life in general, and getting out into nature has always helped reset me. Simple out there. No distractions. Just the trees, the trail, and the sound of your boots. I picked a loop trail tucked into a national forest in Northern California, not far from the Oregon border. I'd been there once before with a friend, but that was years back. I remembered the place being quiet, not too trafficked, with a mix of flat stretches and steady inclines that gave your legs something to do without totally wiping you out. The full loop was around 12 miles, most of it forested, with some good elevation near the middle and a small alpine meadow around mile 7 that I was really looking forward to seeing again. If all went well, I'd be back at the trailhead by sunset. I got an early start, pulled into the empty dirt lot around 6:30 a.m., just as the light was starting to push through the trees. I parked under a big pine, threw on my boots, and shouldered my pack. I had water, food, a knife, bear spray, and a whistle. I wasn't expecting any real danger. I just liked being prepared. I locked the car and stepped onto the trail just before 7 a.m. The first few miles were easy. The trail dipped through thick forest, mostly fir and pine, with the occasional break where I could see the sun climbing up the side of the ridge. Bird calls came and went. A breeze kept the mosquitoes off me for the most part. The air still held some coolness from the night. It was perfect. For a while, I didn't think about anything, just walked. Around mile 3, the trail started climbing. The forest thinned a little, opening up into low shrubs and boulders scattered like forgotten tools. I slowed down, not in a rush. I stopped to drink water and eat a granola bar, standing still and watching a squirrel pick through some moss. It felt like the kind of day where nothing bad could happen. It felt safe. By the time I reached the ridgeline, it was almost 10 a.m. The view opened up. I could see tree-covered slopes rolling out in every direction, the peaks beyond layered in dusty blue. I stayed up there for a few minutes, just breathing. Not a sound beyond the occasional gust of wind moving through the trees. The descent from the ridge was slow and steady. I made good time, passing into thicker woods again. At mile 6, the ground leveled out and the forest grew denser. It was darker here, with underbrush pressing closer to the trail and pine needles thick underfoot. I liked it. It felt quiet and forgotten. That's when things started to shift. I don't know how to explain it exactly. Nothing obvious. Just a feeling. A shift in the way the woods sounded. I stopped to drink water again and realized I hadn't heard a bird call in a while. No insects either. Just the wind and the occasional creak of a tree shifting. It didn't feel dangerous, not yet, just different. I kept going, walking slower now. The trail curved slightly, then dropped down into a small hollow where the trees arched tight overhead. It was dim. I stepped carefully, watching where I put my feet, when I caught something out of the corner of my eye. Movement. I froze. To my right, about 30 yards off the trail, something big moved between the trees. Slow and smooth, like it wasn't in a hurry. At first I thought it might be a deer. Then it turned and I saw the long, low body, the tan fur, and the curve of the tail. Mountain lion. It didn't see me at first. Or maybe it did and just didn't care. It moved through the trees like it had all the time in the world. I didn't move a muscle. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was in my throat. Then it stopped, turned its head and looked straight at me. We locked eyes. It was maybe 25 yards away now, standing halfway behind a tree, one paw slightly lifted. Its body was tense, but not aggressive, just focused, like it was curious, studying me. I didn't run. I knew better. I didn't even reach for my spray. I just stood there, frozen in place, barely breathing. We stared at each other. I don't know how long it lasted. Felt like forever. In reality, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But time moves differently when you're that close to something that could end you in seconds. I remember the way its muscles moved under its fur, slow and smooth, like water. I remember its eyes, yellow, not blinking, its ears twitching just slightly, the way it shifted its weight like it was thinking. I pissed myself. I didn't feel it happen. I just became aware of the warmth spreading down my leg and soaking into my pants. My whole body was locked up. I was terrified, but not in the way I thought I would be. It wasn't screaming panic. It was total stillness, like my body had shut down all non-essential functions and was waiting to see what happened next. Then, just like that, the lion looked away. It blinked once, slowly, turned its head, and walked off into the trees. No rush, no sound, just disappeared. I didn't move for another full minute. My legs felt like wood. When I finally did start moving again, I did it slow. One step, then another. I stayed on the trail but looked around constantly. I knew it might still be nearby, maybe watching. They say mountain lions often follow people for a while. Curiosity, habit, sometimes hunting. I didn't know which one it was. I didn't stop again. Every sound made me jump. Every gust of wind sounded like breathing. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just walked. The meadow I'd been looking forward to didn't matter anymore. I barely looked at it when I passed through. The sun was high now, blazing down, but I still felt cold. The adrenaline had burned out, and all that was left was the ache of my legs and a deep, bone-level fear. By the time I made it back to the car, it was nearly 4 p.m. I threw my pack in the back seat, got in, and locked the doors out of reflex. I sat there for a long time. My hands were shaking. My pants were still damp from the piss earlier, and I didn't even care. I didn't tell anyone about it for a while. Not because I was embarrassed, but because I couldn't explain it in a way that felt real. You read about mountain lion encounters. You hear stories. But standing there, being looked at by something wild, something that close to you on the food chain, it changes how you think, how you move, how you see the woods. It didn't attack. It didn't growl or leap, but it didn't run away either. It just stood there, calm and curious, like I was a puzzle it didn't feel like solving yet. That was almost worse. I still hike. I still go into the woods. But I don't hike alone anymore. Not out there. Not in places like that. Because now I know what it feels like to be seen by something wild. Not as a friend, not even as a threat. Just as a possibility. And that's enough to change everything. I went hiking in Tennessee with my old college roommate and a mutual friend one weekend in early summer. It had been a while since the three of us had done something like that together. We used to be tight back in school, but life took over, jobs, moves, relationships, all of it. So when my old roommate called and said he'd be driving down through Tennessee and wanted to do a couple nights of hiking, I figured why not. Our other buddy had just quit a job and was free, so we all made it happen on short notice. We weren't trying to do anything extreme, just a few days out in the woods, nothing too far from the car, nothing technical. We picked a state forest area, not a national park, not even a marked trail system. A little off the radar. Some of it was public land, some of it was just old logging country with Forest Service roads cutting through. My roommate had done a couple trips around there and said it was pretty open, lots of clearings, a few small creeks, and not much traffic. He wasn't wrong. We drove in on a Friday afternoon, got to the trailhead by 3 p.m. There wasn't much of a parking area, just a wide dirt shoulder where the road curved and dropped into thicker woods. The trail itself wasn't marked by any signs, just a narrow path heading west into the trees. It looked well used but not official. Probably just a popular cut-through made by hunters or locals who knew the place better than we did. We packed light, just enough food for 2 nights, water filters, tents, the usual. No cell signal out there, which was expected. It was hot that day, upper 80s and muggy. Typical southern summer. Bugs were already bad, but we had spray. The first few miles were fine. The trail climbed up for a while, then flattened out into a stretch of open forest, mostly oaks and pines. Light came through in patches, and everything had that late afternoon glow. We walked for maybe 2 hours, talking off and on, then quieting down as we settled into the rhythm of hiking. We stopped around 5:30 to look at the map, trying to pick a spot to camp for the night. My roommate had a place in mind near a small stream where the trees opened up a bit and there was supposedly a good flat spot with soft ground. Sounded perfect. We kept moving and got there maybe 45 minutes later. It was everything he said it would be: quiet, shaded. A steady little stream moving clear water through a rocky bed, just deep enough to cool off in. We dropped our packs, got the tents set up, and gathered some deadfall to cook dinner. The bugs died down once it got darker, and the temperature dipped a few degrees. We sat around, ate, and just listened to the woods. Coyotes in the distance, a couple owls, frogs near the water. Nothing out of the ordinary. Felt like we were the only people out there. The next morning, we packed up and started heading downstream. The trail followed the water for a little while, then turned and climbed again. We wanted to follow the creek instead of staying on the trail. It wasn't deep, and we figured we'd run into other cool spots or maybe even a waterfall. None of us had a strict plan. We just wanted to explore, take our time, and enjoy being out there. It was around 10 a.m. when we came to a spot where the creek widened out and got shallow again. Rocks stretched across in a natural path, and we could have crossed there easily. It looked like the kind of place where people probably stopped a lot. Flat ground, some logs to sit on, open sky overhead. The sun was burning hot by then, and we were sweaty and ready to take a short break. We were just about to step down toward the water when I saw movement on the far side of the creek. At first, I thought it was just another group of hikers. A few guys, maybe 6, coming out of the brush and heading toward the creek from the opposite side. But something was off. The color didn't look right. I kept staring, trying to figure out what I was looking at, and that's when it hit me. They were naked, completely naked except for shoes and socks. I didn't say anything right away. I just kind of froze there, looking. My roommates stopped beside me, noticing I wasn't moving. Then they saw them too. The 6 guys moved in a loose group, talking to each other, not in any kind of rush. They looked comfortable, like they knew where they were going, like they did this all the time. They stepped onto the rocks to cross, water splashing around their feet. They weren't carrying bags or clothes. No gear, no hats, no phones. Just shoes and socks. That's what really stuck out, the shoes. Like they cared about foot protection but nothing else. It didn't seem sexual or anything. Just odd. Like it was totally normal for them to be that way, walking through thick woods, sun blazing down, bugs everywhere. We stood there without saying a word, just watching them. They didn't look over, didn't acknowledge us, just crossed the creek one after another and disappeared into the woods on our side, heading in the same general direction we'd been going. I didn't feel scared exactly, not yet, just unsettled. I mean, people can do whatever they want. Nudist hikers, whatever, but something about how quiet they were, how organized and casual. It didn't feel like the first time they'd done that. Felt practiced, routine. But the area we were in wasn't near any major trail system or known nudist camp. This was deep in the woods, off any map or service road. We crossed the creek a couple minutes later. I half expected to see them waiting on the other side, but there was no sign, just woods and their faint boot prints on the path ahead. We kept going, following the same direction. The forest closed in more, and the air got still. No birds, no wind, just heat and the sound of our feet crunching leaves and snapping twigs. We weren't talking anymore, not because we were scared yet, but because something had shifted. We were all on edge now, not sure what we'd seen or why it bothered us. After about half an hour, we found a clearing. It looked like a place where trees had been cleared long ago. Maybe an old campsite or hunting ground. There was a fire ring made of rocks, some burned wood, and a few logs around the edge for sitting. It looked old but used. Hard to tell how recently. We decided to stop there, mostly just to regroup and figure out what we wanted to do. I took a walk around the edge of the clearing, just looking around. That's when I found it. Tucked just inside the treeline was a pile of clothes. Folded neatly, shirts, pants, even underwear. A stack about 6 sets deep. All men's clothes. No bags, no IDs, no water bottles. Just the clothes, stacked like someone had undressed carefully and left them there on purpose. That was the moment I started to feel real fear. Not jump scare fear. The slow, creeping kind. The kind where your body knows something's off before your brain catches up. I called the others over. They saw it and went quiet. None of us wanted to touch anything. We just stood there, looking at that pile, realizing those 6 guys hadn't just been out for a naked stroll. They'd left their clothes behind. And if they'd been using this clearing, they might be close. We didn't camp there. We didn't eat. We just started moving again, fast and quiet, heading off trail, trying to make a loop back toward the car without retracing our steps. The rest of the day was slow, tense hiking. Every stick crack made us jump. Every shape in the trees looked like a person. I kept checking behind us, expecting to see them again. But we never did. We got back to the car by sunset, exhausted and silent. The first thing I did when we got back to town was look it up. Turns out there are groups of people who hike naked on purpose. Some call it naturist hiking or free hiking. There's even a day, Hike Naked Day, in June, but it was May. And these guys weren't just casually enjoying nature. No backpacks, no gear, no trail signs. Just them, the creek, and that pile of folded clothes. I couldn't stop thinking about that. No food, no water, no protection from the sun or ticks or anything. And yet, they'd been out there like it was normal. I don't know if it was a ritual, a group with rules, or something darker. I don't know if they were squatting in the woods, or if we stumbled onto something we weren't supposed to see. But it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like a bunch of carefree guys living free. It felt practiced, secretive, like we'd interrupted something. I haven't hiked in Tennessee since, not because I'm scared of the woods, but because I realized how much can happen out there that no one ever knows about. There are places not far from the road, where the trees close in and the air goes still, and whole lives unfold just out of sight. And sometimes what you see isn't nearly as disturbing as what you don't. I went hiking alone in Vermont late last spring. It was early May, and the trees had just started to fill out with new leaves. The snow was completely gone, but there was still that cool dampness in the air that you only get up north in the springtime, that mix of thawed earth and rotting leaves and fresh growth. It's my favorite time of year. Everything's quiet, not many bugs yet, and hardly anyone else is out there. Most people wait until Memorial Day or even June. I took a few days off work and drove up to central Vermont, near Groton State Forest. I wasn't on any of the official trails, at least not the whole time. I started on a marked trail, but I brought a detailed topographic map and planned to do a little bushwhacking to connect to an old forest road that looped back toward my car. I'd mapped it out carefully. I've done a lot of solo hikes, and I'm used to reading terrain and keeping track of where I am without a GPS. I had everything I needed: tent, sleeping bag, food, stove, filter, extra layers, even a paper notebook where I jot down little things I notice. Bird calls, changes in the trail, plants I can't ID. That kind of stuff. The first 2 days went by slow and peaceful. I only saw one other person the entire time, An older guy maybe a couple miles from the trailhead, heading in the other direction. After that, it was just me and the woods. Long stretches of silence broken only by my boots on damp leaves or the occasional squirrel. I camped near a ridge the first night and near a shallow stream the second. Both nights were calm, cool, and uneventful, just the kind of quiet reset I'd been craving. It was on the third day that things started to feel strange. I just crossed a long section of dense forest, mostly beech and pine, on my way toward the old forest road that wasn't marked on the map anymore but still showed up faintly in satellite images. It was slow going, lots of blowdown and soft, uneven ground. I had to check my map constantly. I was stopping for a break late morning, sitting on a mossy rock, eating a peanut butter bar and drinking some filtered water when I saw something red through the trees. It was maybe 80 feet off to the left, not directly on my path but visible enough to catch my eye. Bright red, standing out hard against all the green and brown. It looked like a shirt or maybe a jacket hanging from a low branch. I almost ignored it. People leave trash in the woods all the time, but something about it bugged me. It wasn't torn up or faded like you'd expect from something that had been left out in the weather. It looked clean, like it had been put there recently. So I stood up and walked toward it, making a mental note of the direction so I wouldn't lose my spot on the map. The red thing turned out to be a flannel shirt. It was buttoned up and hung neatly over a thick branch, like someone had draped it there carefully. I looked around but didn't see any bags, trash, or other gear. No signs of a campsite, no fire ring. The area was flat and clear underfoot but didn't look like a place someone had been staying. I was about to turn back when I noticed something else. 2 mounds of dirt maybe 15 feet behind the tree, slightly raised and darker than the forest floor around them. Fresh soil, not packed down or overgrown. Just 2 narrow, human-length piles with no grass or plants growing on them. Right next to those were 3 upright headstones. 2 were old, with moss on them and worn lettering I couldn't even read. The third was newer, white marble, clean edges. That one had no name, no inscription, just a smooth, blank face like it hadn't been carved yet. The whole scene didn't make sense. The shirt, the graves, the headstones just sitting there in the middle of nowhere, totally out of place. I felt this tight knot in my chest, a slow squeeze that got worse the longer I looked at it. I didn't want to stay, but I walked closer anyway. I had to know what I was looking at. I squatted next to the fresh graves. No smell, no bugs. The dirt was loose but packed enough to suggest it had been dug recently. I didn't touch anything. I didn't want to. The older headstones looked legit, carved names and dates from the 1800s, hard to read but not fake. The newer one looked like it had been bought from a monument shop and just never engraved. It didn't belong out here. There were no flowers, no markings, no sign of ritual or ceremony. Just 3 stones, 2 graves, and a bright red shirt on a branch. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the trees, half expecting to see someone watching me. But nothing moved. I marked the spot on my map as best I could, then turned and retraced my path until I hit the old forest road. From there, I walked fast, barely stopping, and reached my car by late afternoon. I debated what to do. I sat behind the wheel with the engine off, staring at the dirt road ahead, thinking about those graves. Eventually, I drove to the nearest town with a police station, about 30 minutes west. I didn't know exactly what to say. I just told them I'd been hiking and found what looked like some graves and some headstones out in the woods. I didn't mention the shirt or my gut feeling, just the facts. They took down the location and told me they'd check it out. I didn't hear anything for 2 days. Then, I got a call from the same officer I'd spoken with at the station. He said they'd gone out and located the site. Turns out, someone had been stealing headstones from a nearby rural cemetery. A few had gone missing over the last couple of months, mostly old ones that people rarely visited. One of them matched a record from 1874. The others were too worn to be sure. The newer one was completely blank, probably stolen before it had even been engraved. The shirt wasn't anything special, just a normal red flannel, like you'd find at any store. No blood, no ID, no trace evidence. As for the fresh graves, they were empty. They brought out cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, the whole deal. But nothing was buried there. just holes partially filled back in with loose soil. Someone had gone through the trouble of digging 2 full-sized graves and covering them, then planting headstones like it was a backyard plot. The officer told me, flat out, they had no idea what the point of it was. They weren't ruling anything out. I couldn't shake the image of those empty graves. They weren't symbolic. They were shaped right, spaced right, filled in like someone had every intention of using them, or had already used them and moved the contents somewhere else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how far off the trail that spot was, how clean the graves were, how fresh the soil looked. Someone had been there very recently, maybe the same day I found it, maybe just before I walked up. I started digging into missing persons reports in the area, reading local forums, checking the news. Nothing unusual came up. No hikers missing, no suspicious activity in that part of the forest. Just a few articles about vandalism at old cemeteries. One mentioned the same town I'd gone to. It was probably connected. Still, something about the whole thing felt off. If it was just about stealing old stones, why drag them way out into the woods? Why dig new graves? Why place the stones so neatly, like it was a real burial plot? And what was the shirt doing there? Who wore it and why leave it? I went over it all again and again, trying to reason it out. Maybe someone was mentally ill. Maybe it was some kind of obsession with death or solitude or history. Maybe it was just a long, strange prank. But that didn't explain the graves. It didn't explain why it all felt so deliberate. Couple weeks later, I went back. I know that probably sounds stupid, but I had to see it again. I brought a friend this time. Not someone who knew everything, just someone who wanted to hike. We followed my same route, marked on the map, and made it back to that spot without too much trouble. But everything was gone. The shirt was gone. The headstones were gone. The graves were still there, but barely visible, just sunken spots in the ground, half covered in fallen leaves and needles. You wouldn't notice them unless you knew exactly where to look. No sign anyone had ever been there. I didn't say anything to my friend. We just kept moving. When I got home, I called the officer again, told him what I saw. He said they hadn't moved anything. The headstones were still in evidence storage. They hadn't gone back out there since the first visit. No one else was supposed to know the location. So either someone had followed the cops and gone back to clean up, or someone else had already been watching before I ever reported it. I stopped hiking alone after that. I still go out sometimes, but never off trail. Never without cell service. I can't stop thinking about those graves, those stones, and the fact that someone out there had a reason for putting them there. Far off any path, hidden deep in the woods. I don't know if they were burying something or getting ready to, but they were careful, quiet, thoughtful, and they're still out there. I had just arrived on the Big Island the day before. It was my first real trip to Hawaii, and I'd been planning it for months. The idea was simple. Hike every morning, spend the afternoon swimming or exploring, and eat my body weight in poke by night. I flew in from the mainland and crashed in a cheap rental on the edge of Hilo. Nothing fancy, but clean enough to drop my bags and sleep off the travel day. I didn't come to hang out inside. I came to hike. That morning, I woke up before the sun, around 5 a.m. The air outside was thick and humid, even before daylight, but there was a coolness to it that told me it was early. I threw on a synthetic hiking shirt, light pants, trail runners, grabbed a banana and a granola bar, and hit the road. I was headed for a trail I'd read about online. A quiet one near a forest reserve that didn't get as much tourist traffic. It wasn't long or hard, only a few miles in and back. But the main draw was that it wound through untouched jungle and ended at a small waterfall. Exactly the kind of peaceful morning I was after. I pulled into the small gravel lot at the trailhead just as the sky started turning purple. There were no other cars there, which was perfect. I liked having the trail to myself. I liked hearing the forest without any talking over it. I locked up, grabbed my small day pack with a first aid kit, water, and my headlamp already strapped on since I'd be walking in the dark for a little bit. Just a few steps into the woods and it already smelled like wet moss and muddy roots. The chirping and buzzing of insects hadn't let up since the night before, and I could hear birds already calling out in short bursts from up high in the trees. Everything was slick from overnight rain. My shoes sunk a little into the soft dirt, but I kept a good pace, 1 foot after the other, careful not to slip on anything shiny with moss. 10 minutes in, just as I found my rhythm, my stomach sent the first alert. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just that banana and nerves, but a few more minutes in and it was clear. It wasn't a casual kind of pressure. It was the full, deep warning kind, the kind that made me tighten my abs without meaning to. I stopped for a second, looked ahead and behind, and debated whether I should push through the hike first or take care of business now. Then another wave hit, and I knew I didn't have long. I needed a bathroom, not eventually, right now. I turned back, faster than before, almost jogging in parts. The lot wasn't far, and I remembered seeing a green plastic shape on the edge of the trees near the trailhead. A porta potty. One of those sun-bleached types with a warped roof and a faded white sign that probably hadn't been cleaned in weeks, maybe months. Normally I'd rather find a quiet spot off trail with a trowel, but this wasn't mainland backcountry. The soil here was soaked and the jungle was dense. I didn't have time to be picky. By the time I got to the porta potty, I was sweating. Not from the heat, but from the effort of holding it together. The little plastic door creaked as I yanked it open and stepped in, pulling it shut behind me. It was pitch black inside. Not a crack of daylight yet. The stale, sour smell of dried urine and heat was thick. I'd smelled worse, but not often. I flipped on my headlamp and aimed it around. There were old streaks down the walls, a pile of dead leaves near the foot of the toilet seat, a few crumpled sheets of toilet paper stuck to the floor. But I didn't care. I pulled my pants down and sat. My relief was immediate and complete. Felt like being rescued. I leaned forward with my elbows on my knees, breathing out through my mouth, trying not to smell anything deeper than I had to. I didn't even think about checking for spiders or bugs or anything else. I just wanted to be done and get on with my day. Once I finished, I stayed seated for a moment, catching my breath, headlamp aimed at the floor in a lazy circle. I looked up to find the toilet paper, typical single ply, the kind that basically disintegrates when you touch it, and that's when I saw it. In the top left corner of the porta potty, no more than 2 feet from my face, was a banana spider. It was just hanging there, legs stretched out wide like it was relaxing, not a care in the world. But it was huge. The body itself was maybe the size of a plum, but with the legs splayed out, it had to be 5 inches across, maybe more. I'd seen pictures of them before online. I knew they weren't deadly, just big and fast and not something I wanted anywhere near me. I froze, hoping it would stay still and I could grab the toilet paper without bothering it. I slowly reached out to the side, careful not to make sudden moves. I was still sitting, pants around my ankles, trying to be as quiet and slow as possible. My headlamp, still aimed toward the corner, lit up the spider clearly. Its body shimmered slightly, yellow and dark brown, and I could see the fine hair on its legs. As my hand got closer to the toilet paper roll, I must have shifted just a little too much because the beam of light moved suddenly and hit the spider dead on. It went crazy. The spider jerked back, then forward, then began moving in tight, wild circles like it was trying to escape its own web. I jerked my hand back and screamed, but in that muffled way you do when you're in disbelief and too scared to even let it out loud. My whole body clenched. The spider zipped downward, fast, too fast, and dropped from its corner, landing somewhere behind me. I lost all sense of calm. I twisted around, scanning with my light, trying to see where it landed, but it was gone. That thing was gone. My heart was beating like it was trying to escape my chest. I stood up without thinking, pants still at my ankles, feet stumbling over each other, and that's when I felt it. Movement between my legs. I froze. It was in my underwear. I don't know how I didn't pass out. I didn't scream. I just froze. It was like my brain turned off and all that was left was raw panic. My light caught the edge of something moving, some fast twitch of yellow and black, and my legs instinctively tightened. That made it worse. The spider bolted up my right thigh, inside the leg of my underwear. I couldn't think anymore. I started jerking my body left and right, trying to shake it out without touching it. I stomped my feet, twisted my hips, bent my knees. Nothing worked. The thing was hanging on. I could feel its little legs moving on my skin, fast and sticky. I kept wiggling, trying everything short of grabbing it. I didn't know if it was going to bite or not, and I didn't want to find out. I burst out of the porta potty, still yanking up my pants, screaming with every breath I had. The sun hadn't fully come up yet, but the lot was bright enough to see. I stumbled out into the gravel, still hopping, still trying to shake it loose, pants halfway on. I didn't care who saw me. I wanted it off me. I wanted it gone. Somewhere in that chaos, it must have dropped out. I didn't feel it anymore. No more movement. No more tiny feet. I stood there in the gravel, headlamp tilted awkwardly on my forehead, shirt soaked with sweat, pants bunched around my hips, just breathing hard. I turned back to the porta potty but didn't go near it. I wasn't stepping back in there, not even to check. I stood for another few minutes, walking small circles, hands on my head, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind or if that really happened. It really happened. It all happened, and I had no clue where that spider went. I finally managed to clean myself up as best I could with a few napkins from my car. I didn't finish my hike. I didn't even try. I sat in the car with the windows down for a while, replaying it all in my head, over and over again. I couldn't believe how fast that thing moved. I couldn't believe it ended up in my pants. I showered 3 times that day. Every hair I found on my leg made me jump. I kept checking my clothes, my pack, my shoes. I didn't even unpack for 2 days. I thought about it constantly. It wasn't a life or death thing, but it was the most physically violated I'd ever felt by nature. It was a full-on invasion. I ended up talking to a local at a gear shop later that week, and he casually confirmed that, yeah, banana spiders are everywhere. Harmless. Big, but harmless. I nodded, said I wasn't worried, but inside I was still clenching at the memory. It didn't matter if it couldn't hurt me. It mattered that it touched me. I finished my trip, did other hikes, stayed far away from any porta potties. When I had to go, I went in the woods. I checked every leaf, every branch, every tree for webs. I never sat without looking again. And that first hike, that porta potty, that spider, it never left me. Even now, months later, when I pull on my underwear in the morning, I check. I shake them out. Every single time. No exceptions. And if I ever go back to that island again, I'm bringing my own toilet paper, a flashlight, and a full-on bug suit. Dignity can come later. That spider may have disappeared in a flash, but the memory stuck around. Long after the bite that never came, long after the panic faded, that moment is still curled up somewhere in the back of my brain. Legs out, waiting. My wife and I had been planning our honeymoon for nearly a year. We both wanted something that gave us a bit of adventure. Something more than just lounging on a beach with drinks all day. That stuff is nice, sure, but we wanted to remember this trip, not just by photos, but by something that felt real. Thailand seemed like the right pick. It had beaches, food, culture, and these thick jungles that looked like something out of a movie. We found an island resort that was a bit more remote, less touristy. The rooms were bungalows with thatched roofs, right on the sand. It was beautiful, quiet, warm, and peaceful. We had done a couple of guided hikes earlier in the week, just to ease into it. But on the 5th day of the trip, we decided to go out on our own. The staff at the resort gave us a hand-drawn map with some trails marked. The path we chose looked manageable, just under 4 hours round trip through some of the deeper jungle and then back out to a small river that looped toward a beach further south. It was supposed to be quiet, barely anyone used that trail. That was part of the reason we chose it. We packed water, bug spray, a few energy bars, and started early in the morning. The sky was still a little pale when we set off. The first hour was smooth. The trail was narrow, but still easy enough to follow. The heat hadn't kicked in fully yet, and there was a constant buzz from the insects hidden in the trees. Birds flitted through the canopy above us, and everything was green, deep, damp green with vines and leaves so thick they looked like a wall in some places. We moved at a steady pace, keeping an eye on the trail markers painted on some of the trees. They were faded red strips, but they stood out just enough. We kept our voices low, not because we were scared or anything, but because the place felt like it deserved quiet, felt old, alive in a way, not in any supernatural sense, just full of things that had been there far longer than we had. About 2 hours in, the trail thinned even more. The underbrush had started to grow over parts of it. We had to duck under fallen branches and step over tangled roots. The air was thicker now, and sweat was starting to soak through our clothes. We were in the middle of discussing whether we should take the fork that would bring us closer to the river or keep going straight when we heard it. A scream. Not just any scream. It was raw and high-pitched and went on far longer than it should have. It wasn't someone goofing off, not some tourist yelling just for fun. It sounded like panic, like someone had just seen something they couldn't process. We both froze. It had come from somewhere ahead and off to the right of the trail. Another scream followed, this one more broken, as if the person couldn't breathe properly. I remember the feeling that came over me. It wasn't fear exactly. It was this cold, nervous energy that ran down my back and into my legs. My first instinct was that someone had fallen. Maybe they'd broken something. Maybe they were bitten by something. There were snakes in this jungle, nothing crazy deadly in this region, but enough to put someone in the hospital. We moved toward the sound, calling out as we walked. There was no path in that direction, just thick undergrowth and uneven terrain. The jungle floor was a mess of roots and slippery soil, and it took us several minutes of pushing through it before we heard the scream again. Closer this time. We moved faster now, hearts pounding, hands out to keep branches from whipping back into our faces. I was focused on not tripping, on finding stable footing, and on not missing the sound if it came again. Eventually, we reached a small clearing. It wasn't much, just a patch where the trees thinned out enough to let a bit of sunlight through. And in the middle of it, sitting on the ground, knees pulled to his chest, covered in dirt and sweat, was a man. He looked up at us like he didn't even believe we were real. His eyes were red and wide. His clothes were soaked and torn in places. His face was streaked with mud, and he had scratches all over his arms and neck. He looked like he'd been out there for days. He tried to stand when we reached him, but he was shaking so badly he couldn't. He kept looking past us, then down at the ground, then back at us again. I tried to offer him water, and after a moment he took it, spilling half of it on himself before getting it to his mouth. Took a while, but eventually he calmed down enough to breathe properly. We helped him to his feet. He was barefoot, his shoes were gone, and his feet were swollen and cut up. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but I kept quiet. It wasn't the time for that. We just needed to get him out. We moved slowly, retracing our steps. He couldn't walk very well, so we took turns helping him along. The jungle seemed heavier now. Every sound felt sharper. I was alert to everything. Branches snapping, birds fluttering off suddenly, the way the wind moved the leaves. The man mumbled a few things, but most of it didn't make sense. He kept glancing over his shoulder like he was expecting something to come after him. I didn't know if he was hurt worse than it seemed or just badly dehydrated and out of his mind. Either way, we needed to get him out. Took us longer to get back than it had to come in. The heat was brutal now, and we were all sweating like we'd been running. When we finally made it to the trail again, I felt a kind of relief I hadn't expected. Just seeing those faint red markings on the trees gave me something solid to follow. We stopped once for water and a quick snack. The man barely ate, just sipped more water and kept glancing around. He still hadn't told us anything, and I didn't want to push him. By the time we reached the edge of the jungle and the dirt path that led back to the resort, he could barely walk. My wife ran ahead to get help, and I stayed with him in the shade. I looked at him more closely then, tried to take in the details. He looked familiar. Something about his face, the shape of his jaw maybe, or the way his mouth moved when he blinked too fast. I couldn't place it then, but it nagged at me. The resort staff came with a golf cart and took him straight to the nurse's office. A local doctor was called, and after a few hours, we found out that the man had been missing since the previous morning. He had set out on a solo hike and gotten lost after taking the wrong turn off an unmarked trail. His phone had died. He tried to follow the river downstream, thinking it would lead back to the coast, but the jungle twisted and split around it, and he ended up deeper in without realizing it. He'd spent the night out there, alone, with nothing but a small day pack and no light. He had been out of water by late afternoon the day before. He'd eaten all the food he had, some nuts and a granola bar, and had resorted to drinking from a muddy pool. He tried to climb a tree at one point to look for a way out and had fallen. No major injuries, just bruises and the panic that set in when you realize you're truly alone with no way to call for help. The screams we heard were his last-ditch effort. He told the nurse he didn't even remember doing it clearly. He was just yelling, hoping someone might hear. Later that evening, after he had rested and cleaned up, we saw him again, this time in the common area near the resort restaurant. He had fresh clothes and looked a little better, less like someone on the edge of collapse. That's when it clicked. I recognized him. We had met before, at a wedding, my best friend's wedding to be exact. He was one of the guys in his office. We chatted briefly back then. Nothing major, just work stuff. He lived less than a mile from us back in the UK. We had passed each other walking dogs in the same park. Never talked much, just a nod or a wave. That realization hit me harder than anything else that day. Of all the people we could have found, it was someone from back home. Not just that, but someone tied to my life in a small, specific way. Someone connected to a friend I'd known for over 20 years. I couldn't stop thinking about the chances of that. What were the odds? An island halfway around the world, in the middle of a dense jungle, and we end up being the ones to find him. If we had picked the beach trail that day instead of the river trail, we never would have heard him. He might still be out there, or worse. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because I kept playing the day back in my head. The scream, the panic, the familiarity of his face, the way the jungle swallowed Saond, how random everything had been, and how close it came to ending in something tragic. I lay there next to my wife, listening to the waves outside, thinking about how thin the line really is between being safe and being lost, between the everyday and the extraordinary. We finished the rest of the trip quietly. We didn't go on any more hikes, just beach walks, calm swims, simple meals. We still enjoyed it, but there was a weight to everything now. Something had shifted, not in a bad way, just in a way that made things feel more real. We saw him again a couple of times before we left. He was doing better, getting back to himself. He nodded at us in thanks. I nodded back. Back home, months later, I ran into him again, this time on a street not far from our flat. We didn't stop to talk, just a small wave and a look that said, "I remember." That was enough. There's no storybook ending to this. No grand speech or reunion, just the memory of that day, that scream in the jungle, and the reminder that the world is smaller and stranger than we think.